Welcome back, everyone, as we continue with the MSG 150 at home. Bill Pito along with Cam Smith and Alan Hahn, and we are so happy to have Marty Lyons with us, former New York Jet and current analyst on the radio broadcasts of Jets games. Marty, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to see you.
Bill, my pleasure.
Now, we know you are really close to a lot of people on the front lines of this pandemic. Why don't you tell us all about some of the experiences that you've had?
Well, I've got two sons that are both doctors, one in South Carolina and one in Alabama, that they've both been on the front line. But the doctor from the foundation that I have, Ernie Vimero, he's been on the front line since almost the beginning at Huntington Hospital. And I had a chance to talk to him over this weekend, and he said normally at this time they have probably 5 or 6 people on a ventilator. Right now they have 55. So every single day he goes in there, you know, he's putting himself in harm's way to protect all of us, but I think it's going to take an emotional toll on all the doctors and all these volunteers that are on the front line. And, you know, hopefully we can get this coronavirus under control and, you know, we can get back to some sort of normal life.
And Marty, we wish the best to your family, your sons, and what they're doing. We certainly honor them right now, because that takes a lot of guts to be there on the front lines through something like this. But one thing that I've been noticing while doing my radio show over the last couple of weeks is sports can be a distraction, even if there aren't any games to play. And fortunately, for something to talk about, we are a week away from the NFL draft, and I can't wait to see what my Jets are going to do at number 11 and also later on in this draft. It's a big draft for Joe Douglas, but he's already been busy in his first full off season as GM through free agency. What do you think of the job he's done so far?
Well, I think that's all going to be determined in what they do out there on the field in 2020, if they even get out there on the field. I think that number one, he addressed the need of protecting Sam Darnold. You can't go into a game and have 11 different combinations in 16 games with your offensive line. There's no chemistry, there's no continuity. And I think that was a reflection on how many sacks that they gave up last year, and also an indirect reflection on Le'Veon Bell and his performance. Because Le'Veon Bell is a talented athlete, a talented runner, but he likes to jump cut in the backfield. So he's jump cutting, looking for that hole, and guess what? The hole is there when he sees it, but by the time he gets there, it's already closed. So I think he addressed that during the free agency market. And I think, you know, at the 11th spot, you got to take the best player on your board, whether it's an offensive tackle or a wide receiver. But I do think that he need to get some wide receivers in the draft to help Sam Darnold out a little bit.
Marty, let's go deeper into this offseason and this new normal that we're all in, especially for these NFL teams as they try and get ready for just camp and possibly having a season in 2020. Virtual offseason training is going to start next week for a lot of franchises across the NFL. How do you think that players will react to this? I know when I do my home workouts at home and I'm doing them online, and by no means am I a professional athlete, there's a little kind of disconnect there as opposed to being in the same facility around your teammates and really motivating each other to get work done.
Well, you know, Cam, I think it's going to be hard. I think these players have to be very disciplined. They have to hold themselves accountable. You know, most of these players probably have a gym in their house where they can get some physical workouts. But again, you got to get into playbook. And again, you got to get alongside of that guy that you're going to be playing with to build the chemistry and to build the trust. I go back to the first year that I played with Joe Klecko. And he told me, he said, you know what, you got to be ready to play every single game, because if you're not, either I'm going to get hurt or you're going to get hurt or you'll get somebody else hurt. He goes, so I have to know that you are prepared to play. And I think that that's what these players have to do. And they have to put that responsibility on themselves. They're professional athletes. Hold yourself accountable. Get into the playbook. Do as much as you can right now in preparing for the 2020 season. And then when you get that out there on the field, you're going to have limited time. So I think the preseason games, if the preseason games do play out, are going to be important this year.
Preparation is huge, obviously, for a young quarterback. And for Sam Darnold, it's been transition after transition his first 2 years on top of illnesses, injuries, everything else. When you look at this draft, we can go deeper into it, as you talked about, at 11, even in the second round, they've got a fairly good pick there and multiple other picks after. wide receiver, offensive tackles are two areas that I think you're going to see, and I want to see what you think of this as well, for Joe Douglas to focus on maximizing Sam Darnold's ability to be a great quarterback in year 3.
Well, Alan, this is year 3. Everybody says you have the it factor. Last year, you throw in after the first game, he came down with mono. And then at 1-7, you go and you look at a team that, number one, the players didn't quit on the coaches. The coaches didn't quit on the players. And more importantly to me, coaches didn't quit on the coaches. So I think that now you have to evaluate Adam Gase, his coaching staff. Joe Douglas is going to have his first opportunity to go out and pick his players. I think the biggest improvement that I see is that line of communication. It's open between Joe Douglas and the coaching staff, between the scouts and the coaches and Joe Douglas. So I think that everybody is communicating well over there. And don't forget, they need a pass rusher from the outside. They need an edge rusher. So importantly, I think when you look back at the sack exchange, you had Mark Gastineau on one side, Joe Klecko on the other side. You couldn't double team both of them. So the one that didn't get double teamed was more than likely going to get to the quarterback. And the one that was going to get double teamed, 3 out of 10 times he was going to get to the quarterback. So they need that type of rusher to help their defense out.
Marty, talking about the defensive side of the football, let's move it back to the offensive side and Sam Darnold. As Alan mentioned, entering year 3, what are your expectations for him and that next natural evolution for Darnold? Now, he improved in each of his first 2 seasons, but what do you think he needs to do to make sure that this Jets team takes another step up?
Well, I think you have to be productive. Winning in the NFL is the whole key. You have to make it to the playoffs. There's one extra spot. You have to start the season and say, why not us? But I think the big thing, Kim, is this team has to stay healthy. There was too many people on IR at the end of the season. You lose Avery Williamson during the preseason. That knocks out one of your middle linebackers. You go out on the market last year, you can see C.J. Mosley has an outstanding game against the Buffalo Bills, and then he's gone for the rest of the year. There were so many players on IR. They really have to look at that part of their game and that part of the planning of the team. Why are players getting hurt? Why can't they stay healthy? And then the players have to go in and, again, put some accountability on themselves, make sure that, there's a difference. There's a fine difference between being injured and hurt. Everybody in the NFL after week 2, week 3 are playing hurt. But if you're injured, then you go on the IR. They just had too many injuries last year.
Marty, you referenced the New York Sack Exchange a little bit earlier. You, Mark Gastineau, Joe Klecko, and Abdul Salam. When you look back to that period of time, what memories come to the surface?
Well, Bill, I think going into the game, it wasn't if we were going to get to the quarterback. It was how many times we were going to get to the quarterback. We had a real tight unit. A lot of credit goes to the front 4, and they named the Sack Exchange. But, we had excellent linebackers. We had Greg Buttle. We had Lance Mel. You talk about the secondary that we had. And it's complementary football quite a bit. If you have the coverage down in the secondary, you allow us a second, 2 seconds more to get to the quarterback, you're going to get the sack. But if you don't have the coverage, the ball is going to come out early. I think, I remember going down to the New York Stock Exchange and taking the photo down there. And it was just a great moment that you can look back as we're in isolation and say, wow, you know what? I feel pretty good. I was a part of that. And make sure that you recognize all the people that, helped make it possible.
One of the great nicknames ever for a group, the New York Sack Exchange from the early 1980s. Marty, you have a special photo behind you as we talk to you. Why don't you tell us about it?
I do. That's a special photo because it's a picture of, Coach Bryant. And I think everybody that played for Coach Bryant has a great deal of respect for him. But those were the 3 players that came out of the University of Alabama that played for Coach Bryant that were also number 1 draft choices by the New York Jets. You have Joe Namath in the white. You have Richard Todd, number 14. And, of course, I was over there in the corner looking like I hadn't had a job in a couple weeks. But, Coach Bryant meant so much to all of us. And he came up to visit us one day. And, he had also coached Bob Fry. Bob Fry was a offensive line coach that played for him at the University of Kentucky. So it was a special moment. It was a moment that, every time I look at that picture, I look at really one person that had a big influence on my life, which was Coach Bryant. And I look at two people that I really have great friendship with, and that's Joe Namath and Richard Todd.
So before we let you go, we got to hear an old roll tide, don't we?
Well, you know what, you want to say roll tide, but, you know, I was talking to Kyle Flood last night, and, you know, he used to coach over at Rutgers. He's the offensive line coach down there, and there's a big question mark for college football. Everybody, you know, is trying to figure out when we can get back to something normal. But I think, you know, every time that people say football or sports are a way to escape the real reality of the world, sometimes you have to look at the reality of the world, and you see all these doctors and nurses and people on the front line, and you really say, you know what, those are today's heroes. Those are the role models that our kids really need to look up to, rather than looking at the athletes in the NBA or the athletes in the NFL or Major League Baseball. You know, look at the doctors and nurses and see what they're doing, and realize that, you know, as we reflect, just how grateful we should be.
Well said, Marty, you know from your personal experience. Thanks so much for joining us. Best to you and your family.
My pleasure. You guys stay well, stay safe, stay at home, and let's flatten this curve.
All right, coming up next here on the MSG 150 at home, a look back to Melo's 62 against Charlotte back in 2014 at MSG. When we come back after